Hi, everyone. We are so glad you're here this morning. I'm Beth Francesco, the Senior Director of the National Press Club Journalism Institute. Welcome to today's program, and thank you for making the time to be here. We are recording this program, and we're going to send you a link to the video later today. So if you missed something, don't worry. You're going to have a chance to catch it a second time. We hope that you're going to have questions. Please share them anytime in the Q&A queue. We'll be monitoring them and answering as many as we can in the time that we have. I'm so happy to introduce Nancy Ankrum, editorial page editor for the Miami Herald. We're so excited about the conversation that you have planned. Over to you, Nancy.
Thank you so much. I'm excited too. I spoke recently with David Swerdlick, who oversees the Washington Post's online publication, Post Everything. Its tagline, "The conversation is bigger than you think," which succinctly describes the topic of today's panel. How op-eds can amplify original voices and engage new communities. In other words, how do we give wider voice to the values and ideologies that perhaps we have ignored, dismissed, or through our choices of what we do publish and amplify, felt uninvited to the table? For instance, the preponderance of letters on current issues that we receive at the Miami Herald and publish skew liberal, progressive. Often letter writers at the opposite end of the spectrum only write us to complain that we don't run conservative views. Though we're working to change that, they don't feel invited to the table. Our guests today will tell us how they are making more room for others at that table. After all, the conversation really is bigger than we think. We will be talking to Deborah Douglas, the co-editor-in-chief of the Emancipator, Terry Tang, who is the Los Angeles Times' op-ed editor, and Kate Woodsome, the Washington Post's senior producer of op-ed video. Welcome all. I'm really delighted to talk to you all and suspect you have some very valuable information to impart. Diversity doesn't look the same from community to community. What was missing from your content and your community engagement? And I'll start with Terry Tang.
Yeah, oh, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me. Well, that's a difficult question. You know, the LA Times is a very old paper, and we reflect, many of the old traditions and have for, decades, generations. And, in the last couple years, I think there's really been a real self-examination and self-awareness of what we meant to the community, how much of the community we had not represented. And a lot of it did come from kind of the soul searching that the whole nation went through last year with the Black Lives Matter movement, and just generally the understanding and just a spotlight on how we were dealing with diversity and race, and just how we were dealing with each other in our community. So that, of course, came into our newsroom and came into the way we, I think op-ed has always tried to seek new voices, diverse voices, but we just realized we had to do better. And so I think both in some ways ideologically, but we just simply didn't have enough voices representing the bulk of the people who live in Southern California. So, and that is a very diverse, communities of color that we just weren't reaching. So we made a real effort to kind of look at the kinds of voices we were seeking, and we commissioned a lot of pieces. So I made a real effort to seek out Latino voices, African-American voices, Asian American voices, and brought on columnists who are staff columnists who we didn't have before, who came at us with a lens of personal experience and also expertise that our wonderful other columnists didn't have, because they weren't living lives that were different. So we just needed to do that. And we have, and we just continue to do that. And a lot of it is really just reaching out to those communities, finding writers who otherwise wouldn't be kind of thinking this is their newspaper and inviting them, cold calling them. I do a lot of cold calling and convincing people that, you know, that their voice is not just valued, but deeply needed. So that's how we're going about it. And even gender has always been an issue with op-ed, you know, and opinion pieces. And just even, I mean, at this late stage of our society, it just still is the case that women experts who are many times far more expert with more experience, even in certain fields, we really have to go out and make that actual, you know, kind of commission, invitation, query to get them to feel like, oh, I should do this, because it's a, you know, rather than, and so we have to spend time doing that, very focused doing that.
Yeah, I'm glad that Terry brings up women, because I have served for maybe a decade now as a senior leader at the Op-Ed Project, and our whole point is to increase the share of voice of women and other underrepresented groups in the public conversation. So you are exactly right that women do not have a fair share of voice. And you know, a lot of what gets green lighted onto editorial pages, because I used to be the deputy editorial page editor at the Chicago Sun-Times, it's relational. It's about who feels comfortable to send an email or pick up a phone and send something over. Who has that level of confidence, or who's socialized to have that level of confidence? Men are. And so a lot of times we really have to just, you know, let women know that you have all these degrees, all this wonderful lived experience, and a very particular lived experience that the world needs to know about, so we can make better decisions about how we do this. And so we help them identify the core of their expertise, what they know stone cold, and then explore the metaphorical potential for that.
Let me just say, I had to have a talk with a university communications department down here to really request and make clear that I know you've got women on your faculty of all ethnicities and colors. Why are you not sending me their voices? And they promised to do so. And the next few op-eds that they sent were well written from men. And I have actually found the op-ed project a fabulous resource to get women who are already in our community, but who are not getting their communications department to, you know, to fulfill at least my needs. So yes, it's a wonderful project. Kate, I know you are not putting together pages, but you are seeking voices. Talk about what you do and how you are fulfilling this need.
Yeah, absolutely. On the point of lived experiences, that's actually what I think has been missing from many op-ed pages, whether it's in print or online. And what I do is I tell, I'm a storyteller. I do visual storytelling. And so I think that one of the most persuasive tools to influence public opinion is to see, feel, and hear emotion. And the Washington Post, historically, the opinion pages has been a marketplace of ideas from conservative to liberal, and it has dominated in political opinion. But we're, I think, in the early stages of creating a space for human experiences. And, you know, what are the stories of people who are affected by the policies that are being debated in Washington? And so over the past few years, and now with a growing team of visual editors and designers and illustrators, audio, we're bringing the faces, the voices, the experience of people, not just across America, but the world, so that the Washington Post opinion section better reflects the world we live in rather than just the world right next to me, because, you know, my community probably doesn't look as diverse as others. So I think one of the critical parts of helping to diversify and amplify new voices is to build trust. And it is relationship building, person by person by person. You know, helping, if you find a character whose story you know is critically important for the world to know about, you need to start having conversations with that person, either to help them figure out the point of view they want to write about, or to help them feel comfortable talking about it on camera. And that's one thing, both in the visual storytelling space and in the written op-ed space, that the post opinion section has really been focusing on, is slow down just a little bit, which is almost impossible in this, you know, environment, but slow down just a little bit to look for new voices and then start to develop a relationship with them. Because that first piece might not be the best piece, but over time, if people feel like they are supported, listened to, etc., you know, they will grow into a more powerful voice. And then when others see themselves on the screen, on the pages, it's a modeling exercise where we're saying, you count.
I think that's such a wonderful insight, because I mean, that's what I have been trying to do. And actually, you know, your thought about actually having that experience. So I am moving a lot more towards personal essays.
Yeah.
that can, and that models and signals to people, it's fine. We want to understand your experience.
Yeah.
And you are an expert. You know, so not everything is a white paper, and that's what we want to avoid, is to have the 800-word white paper.
Yeah.
So as we've moved more towards first-person experiences from experts, I mean, physicians, lawyers, whose personal experience is reflected both in their sort of expertise, they then model for our readers and our potential contributors that here's a format that you can feel like you have the right to speak. And for many women, so, you know, our highest performing piece was from a physician who had to deal with a person who didn't want to be vaccinated and was a patient. And she's not someone I could have cold called, because she, you know, obviously I can't cold call a doctor and say, what was your experience? And did you have a patient who refused to be vaccinated and ended up in the hospital in critical care? But she, I think, and she wrote a piece that was entirely personal, but also entirely like based on her expertise. And that really reached readers and it modeled for potential writers that that's the best connection you can make. As an expert, what you're bringing is not just your mind, but your experience. So, and we've also moved into other forms. So we also are starting to do graphical op-eds, which are illustrated comics. And I find that also allows, you know, cartoonists, comics of color, who people feel that's a format. You know, I'm not, you know, writing a sort of policy op-ed is not my game, but here I've got this expertise, I've got this opinion, and those pieces really connect to just our general readership at large. So we're finding that format and voice and just tone really changes and signals to other writers and our readers the ways we want to open up the doors and windows.
Well, one thing we need to remember is the position of our audience member and how they might perceive us. And so I think a lot of people think that, oh, we must be in fancy offices and we're sitting on a throne or something, because we have this platform. We get to put our name on our work for the world to see. And so when you bring it down to an eye-to-eye sort of relational level, and you just take a beat, they're all like overworked, but if you just take a beat and just in an intimate one-to-one sort of way, walk them through the process of helping them see how to make their story better, then that's where the trust develops. And then they send other people to you. Oh, you're going to have a great experience.
Right.
Yeah, it's almost,
go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know if this is the right phrase, but particularly when you're working with new writers or when you're working with people who'll be on camera, which is an additionally intimidating situation, it's almost case managing in terms of setting up the expectations, letting them know, about the potential vulnerability hangover, to borrow a phrase from Brene Brown, of after you share your opinions, you're gonna worry that you sounded stupid or you looked silly or people will hate you. But helping people know, don't read the comments, or checking in with them if it's a particularly vulnerable story, checking in with them after. And we can't help people fully through the process, but I think bringing heart to this mental business is pretty critically important as we expand the circle from just the traditionally white male voice.
Yeah, I've been working hard to incorporate others' voices, African-American women, Hispanic women, women in general, but also young people, no matter the gender, LGBTQ, but from a standpoint of asking them to write not necessarily about their experience. I don't need another op-ed about I was born a poor Black child. What I want is to incorporate their expertise into larger issues, so that there is a Black woman who runs a bank, it's a Black-owned bank, and I want her to write about the economy or economic policy, or her expertise.
Oh, you're talking about Terry.
Yes. Her expertise about things financial, things fiscal.
Right.
I find that if I exploit the expertise of people who are not usually asked to talk about it, I feel like I'm doing a good job in getting them also to another level of involvement in this community. Just because you are a member of the LGBTQ community doesn't mean you have to write about that. If you're an attorney, if you're a tax attorney and can talk about tax policy, I want you to do that too.
Absolutely.
It might not be an occasion for them to say in this particular op-ed, well, I'm gay. But you know what? Many people in the LGBTQ community know that person is gay and know that we want to hear from them too.
And this shift takes a concerted effort and dedication. I mean, at the Washington Post, the op-ed editors over the past year have essentially taken on specific beats so that they can look at the roster of writers that they normally reach for on economics or law or environment, look at that roster and then say, who am I missing? I need to diversify my roster. I need to have different lived experiences, different expertises within that roster. Right. But unless the leadership of the opinion section, if they had not made the decision that we need to look at who we're going to fast and furious because we want to get it on the page quickly, if they hadn't made the decision to slow down and say we need to be better, it wouldn't happen because we're all so damn busy.
Exactly. And usual suspects, you've got their phone number. Yep. You need to, you need something from them, and you're an automatic. I mean, I don't undermine or underestimate usual suspects when you need a quick comment. But Kate, you're right. It's not all about being quick. It's about slowing down and being thoughtful about it, because it's work.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to change generations of systemic racism, right? That appear in the media. And so slowing down now is an investment for the future.
Which is why you should always be in recruiting mode, and which is why you need to leave the office, or in this case, leave our homes and go meet people. So you're identifying solutions and opportunities before you actually need them.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and then also doing an annual audit on who your usual suspects are, because you'll surprise yourself and realize, oh yeah, we kind of leaned on that person too many times. You know, when I was on another part of the newsroom, I actually told my staff, I'm like, this list of people we can't talk to again because they're crutches. So we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Very
I
good.
tend to meet people where they are, pre-COVID, and now I'm, dipping a toe back in the water of going to events, going to gallery openings, this, that, and the other thing. And I consider every event I attend a success if I've asked someone to write an op-ed. Because I've had a conversation, they're involved in something interesting. I've never met them before. It's gotten to the point where even my husband is trained to do so. And yes, he's great. He just, I always tell him, no doofuses, okay? I do have another question. What strategies do you use to cultivate thoughtful rather than positional views to present to your audiences? Kate?
Great question. And I'm talking slowly so that I can figure out my answer.
Come on, you knew it was coming. I pre-interviewed everyone.
How to nurture thoughtful as opposed to positional? I mean,
Yeah.
For the wider audience, what I understand positional opinions is my take on carbon taxes, for example. Thoughtful for me is more human experience driven. And how I nurture that really is conversations, and helping pre-interviewing for me. Before I go into the field and film, I pre-interview, and what that means is I have a conversation, and very often it is a wide-ranging conversation in which I'll hear something that the subject doesn't fully know is a diamond, that is that aha moment for them and for me, but that they have just normalized. And then I'll help them articulate, figure out what is their experience or the lived experience that we want people to understand.
Sure. Got it. Deborah, thank you, Kate. Deborah, talk a little bit about, in answering that question, finding thoughtful views, can you also tell our audience a little bit about the Emancipator itself?
Yes, so the original Emancipator was the first abolitionist newspaper in the country. And so we're reimagining that abolitionist newspaper in Boston in collaboration with Boston University and the Boston Globe. Because Boston was actually a center for the center of the abolitionist movement in the 19th century. And just like the abolition movement reframed the national conversation on slavery, we aim to reframe the national conversation on democracy and realizing quicker the reality of an anti-racist society. And so we're using this point of entry of the Black experience as a point of entry to a bigger discussion about systems. And so this is not a Black publication. This is a publication for everybody because we are all implicated in the dangers of white supremacy. And we say in our mission that democracy is our true north.
Thank you very much. Terry, strategies to exploit, to find the most thoughtful views as opposed to people who are writing in talking points or positional.
I mean, we do run, I do seek out the most passionate advocates. Sometimes they are the ones who have that, passion, insight, and they can maximize that point of view for our readers. But a lot of times I feel that our readers are very, are smart, and we have, a whole diverse range of views among our readers that we do. I guess I do seek out people who are able to see, who have obviously a nuanced view of all parts of life. So, and a lot of it is, especially when I'm reaching out to writers who have not ever been published before, it just takes time to for them to understand what how they're going to communicate what they think. They know what they think. It's just that it's hard, they're not practiced at it, to figure out whether that is clear and whether that's, it represents their feelings and their ideas. And so, and as we work through that, I think it becomes less just my position, my take on something. It then becomes deeper, and it shows it brings in their life experiences, even if they're writing about, let's say if they're a finance professor and their research is in racism through American banking, where the system was really created to be a white supremacist organization. It was not really an economic choices made. It was political and racial choices made. To get a professor, even a professor, excellent, academic background and obviously great fluent writer, but to bring it into a place that can maximize that message and connect to a general audience. Sometimes we do have to, really kind of work with that so that it's not, so I guess it's both, both you want to have your take, but also bring in lived experiences into that sort of essay. And I sort of think of all of our op-eds really as essays, that they have a beginning, middle, and end. And and an essay can't just be made by a robot. It has to be made by a person. And that person, how they phrase something, how they emphasize something is going to be connected to who they are. Why they even entered this field. Why would they even be examining, the financial structures of a society? So
this has been particularly challenging during the Trump era, because obviously, there are very strong opinions and belief systems and lived experiences that we know are not always based in objective fact. And so it's been incredibly challenging for, I will say collectively, the opinion section to make sure that is responsibly reflected, but that is also fact checked. And the way that we did it in visual and video op-eds is that I don't normally go on camera, but during the Trump administration, I ended up going on camera to make sure that I was interviewing and in conversation with Trump supporters, so that I could fact check some of the sentiments in real time and get beyond the rhetorical talking points. Because if you ask somebody, if you dig down a little bit, like, help me understand why you feel that way, or help me understand what you think is a fact, right. It not only is clarifying to me and anybody watching to better understand how the heck they got to that conclusion, but it's a conversation in which I'm being respectful to this individual who probably thinks I'm the enemy because I am the press, doesn't trust me, and they have this realization that I'm actually interested in and curious about their motivations below the rhetoric. But it's, we're all dealing with this new challenge during this era, because the Trump era isn't over, right? And
right.
Yeah.
Well, on that, our letters page after the election, the 2020 election, ran a full page of letters from people who voted for Trump. And California, deep blue, but there were 24% of the electorate voted for Trump, and they're they're our neighbors. They have a voice in our democracy, and they saw things very differently. So obviously all of those letters were deeply fact checked, and as everything we do doesn't matter where you're coming from. And so we fact check everything. And so the letters are too. But we got so much criticism and pushback on that, for doing that, because these were letters that came in to us, as letters are. It was just very interesting because the editorial page editor had to at that time had to write a whole letter explaining that, well, 24% of the California electorate voted for Trump. So we can't just pretend they didn't exist. Maybe they have like reasons, or they have, in any case, they had a choice to make, and they made that choice. And so our letters should reflect, their voices when accurate, So it was very
liberal intolerance is really something, isn't it? And whenever I get pushback from liberal or progressive readers, that I ran, I dare to run, give voice to this conservative, this thoughtful conservative, I think I've done my job. I have a question from one of our viewers, Vasuki Pasumarti. She asks, I'm sorry, I hope you're a she, I'm not quite sure, but the viewer asked, and I apologize if I got your gender wrong. In the age of social media and the protection of the First Amendment, are posts on platforms such as Facebook considered an op-ed? I've been trying to find a definition of this written style.
Well, op-eds really are an expression of thought leadership. Mm-hmm. And so, right? And so social media memes are expressions of thought leadership. We were just talking about, graphics. Those are expressions of thought leadership. And to the point of Robert's question earlier about the kinds of op-eds or what op-ed has made a change in public policy, one op-ed is not coming up to me, but I thought if you open up the perspective a little bit and look at it as an expression of thought leadership, the fact that we wear seatbelts every day, right, when we get in the car, or the fact that we don't believe in drinking and driving anymore, that's thought leadership that actually worked. I actually just wrote a travel guide on the Civil Rights Trail. I don't know if you can see it, but I mean, the movement was an expression of thought leadership. And if we want to point to a document tied to that movement that actually moved people to change minds, I would refer you to Letter from a Birmingham Jail.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Facebook, is that an op-ed? I know that I have gotten op-eds from Facebook. Something significant happens and someone writes really a longer than usual op-ed length piece that is very, very thoughtful. And I have reached out to the person and asked if I can run it as an op-ed. I have known these are not Facebook friends, I have to say. Right. These have been the 4 or 5 times I've done it. I have known that person for years and understand that they're good for it. They are responsible in responsible positions, and they're good for it. Yeah. I have another question from Catherine Collins. What do you think of journalists who share their personal opinions about particular topics to the public? Anyone?
Yeah, it's hard because I think when we started to get 24-hour news and then blogs, and there was an appetite for more and more information and a demand for news organizations to feed the appetite and fill the airtime and fill the space. And there were new platforms invented to accommodate this, this menu of options. Journalists have shifted. I started as a just the facts ma'am journalist and have taken 20 years to be okay with having other people say their opinion, and I still struggle with articulating my own. So, but I know that it's an individual decision, and it's one that news organizations are grappling with at senior levels of what is a social media policy, and it's an incredibly messy debate that has real life consequences, because the positions of leadership can be subjective and not always applied equally across the board. I will say, I personally don't think it's helpful when a straight news reporter voices strong opinions on social media. But that's my personal opinion. And I think that it's hard to say, because it's very confusing for the public to understand that a voicey opinion on Twitter is different from their reported piece. And I think that any reporter would say, I should be judged by the merits of my piece, by the objective, fact-checked nature of the piece that went in print. You should judge my ability and objectivity by that. But I do think in this age, where the public is very confused about what the press is and what the media is, when straight news reporters express strong opinions, I think it gets a bit muddied. But that's my opinion, and it's a very,
I think some are confused. I think some are savvy enough to question if this straight news reporter is posting that Black Lives Do matter, that the pink pussy hat march is right on, then can I trust them?
But that's a whole other part of the conversation, is like, I'm thinking more, this economic policy is baloney, as opposed to your lived experience. And that's an ongoing conversation that is in our newsroom and other newsrooms.
Yep.
If you are Black or a woman or another group that has experienced oppression, are you not allowed to say that you are affected as other people are?
Right.
And I think that I think that Black lives do matter, particularly to Black people. And I think I understand why that happens. But again, that's why I'm saying it's so muddled.
Yeah,
very muddled.
I think that probably care needs to be taken when you're covering certain institutions or companies. That should be off the board. But I don't think that we should require journalists to leave their humanity at the door.
Right.
And I bristle at the notion of objectivity, because it doesn't exist. I mean, objective science exists, right? Like, science exists, but we can't be objective people. We can pursue this ideal of objectivity, but the idea that some people are pure and some people are not. Some people, you just can't see them not being objective. You can't see their bias, or their bias is the white male default. And so it has a level of credibility that I, in the body that I walk around in, does not get the benefit of the doubt of that.
Yeah, you have a much more nuanced answer than mine, because obviously,
I love
it's true, because obviously, when I make decisions of who to interview and produce an objective piece of journalism, my lived experience went into the choices I made, and therefore it's not entirely objective. So you're 100% right to raise that.
But I think everything we do is subjective. We just have to realize whether our subjectivity is leaving people out,
Right.
whether we are casting a broad enough net. I mean, especially as an opinion editor, I'm not going to apologize for my subjectivity, but I do have to question, at the end of the day, what's the result of my subjectivity? Did I leave you out and let you in? Well, why?
Instead of saying that we're these pure objective people, we should say we are subjective. Now let's calibrate for that. Like, how can I move myself and my stuff out of the way to make room for the people that we serve?
Exactly. Terry, I think I cut you off.
Well, no. The other point that Kate and Deborah were saying reminds me that, our search and need for diversity within newsrooms is actually the whole point is to bring in lived experiences of reporters and editors who can see through a somewhat different lens, who see blind spots that the traditional institutions have had, just simply because of who ran them, right? I mean, in the 60s, almost all newsroom leaders were all entirely male and white male. I mean, if you've ever seen those photos, it's a bank of 30 white men determining what goes on the front page. So that's also part of the muddiness. I mean, we seek top editors of different backgrounds in order to bring that background, those lived experiences, into the newsroom to reflect a whole sense of our society. So in a way, that's the new project. That's the necessary project. So we can't then cut it off to say, well, if you're totally this objective, then then you're cutting off what we've been missing. And right. So and especially in opinion journalism, the whole point really is to open up the windows and doors to new voices who have different approaches and thoughts, and gendered voices that are different from who has been speaking before.
I feel like opinion journalism is just like, we're not kidding ourselves.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas I will see colleagues who are on the news side, and they will tweet something that is mocking a politician, and then they will say that they are objective journalists, whatever objective means. And I think you're kidding yourself, so.
Yeah, well, the thing about diversification, which we keep failing at, but when it happens, then we need to calibrate for getting people up through the ranks to real decision-making positions, and also creating a culture where you can really open up and share yourself, not bring people in and then browbeat them or shame them into being afraid to like really share their experiences or bring those into the decision-making process, because your default experience is the only one that you consider valid. And I've been in many, many newsrooms where that was the case. If you weren't on this program, then something is wrong with you.
Right. I mean, I think so many of us have of color, gender, whatever, have been through the experience of being brought in. Yes, we want to hear your experiences. We value your experiences. And then you bring them a story idea and they go, oh, no, that would never work. I was like, no, why am I here? And why aren't you listening? And Deborah, I think what you have touched on, I think Bob Weiner also asks about, yes, diversity in the editing ranks, but are there male editors who are giving great voice to women and people of color? I think at where I am, definitely. I think, and also, it's been an evolution.
Yes.
Where I worked, the newsroom I worked in at this same institution 25 years ago has just generationally changed in many, many ways. And I have to give credit to the leadership. I have to give credit to leadership listening to the changes in this community. And in the general environment. So I'm not sure there are as many people, speaking only from my experience, standing in the way, which to me is all to the good. But can anyone talk about male editors who are giving great voice to others?
I'm sorry. I mean, I think, again, I'm with the Washington Post, and traditionally the Washington Post opinion section has been dominated, I think, historically by white men on the pages, and certainly our leadership has a large number of white men. And Fred Hyatt is the head of the editorial board in the opinion section, and he has made it a priority to create space for other voices. I mean, the mandate for our editors to take the time and look at their roster of writers and say, who are we missing? Who else can we get? Came from Fred Hyatt, Ruth Marcus, Mike Larrabee, Mike Duffy. These are people that recognize the work we're doing now is for the future, to make sure that we don't have these conversations over and over and over again. Because, for the people fighting for this change, what some are calling a reckoning is more like a dawning realization that people have already had before. It's Groundhog Day.
Right.
And so some people are like, where have you been for the past decades? But I will say, and I feel incredibly proud of the work that Fred Hyatt is setting the tone for, to make sure we have what's called Voices Across America, which is an initiative to bring in local opinions, to make sure that our visual storytelling uplifts voices that don't look like me. So it can happen. With the pressure and support internally, and of course externally, it has become impossible to ignore and embarrassing if you do.
Sure, exactly. Anyone else? If not, I have a question from David Palacios, and yes, I will be subjective. He's from the Tennessean, and I love him dearly. What do you know about the demographic that reads you, and what are you doing to grow that audience? Anyone? Terry?
I'm not sure that we know exactly the demographics other than, generally like subscribers to the LA Times. But, this idea of opening windows and doors to have many more voices that represent the community, that's also an economic imperative, with mainstream newspapers really needing to connect with their communities to just stay economically viable and healthy and to thrive. You're going to have to represent your community. Things are just not the way it kind of used to be, maybe 30 years ago. So that's how we are, we don't actually pick out, this is what we need, that this is our readership. But we're trying to find is our new readership, the readers that we need. And we know because, California is 39 million people. 8 million people live in LA County. And we need to serve millions more of them to be our readers. And how do you do that? You have to bring in people who have, in communities in the past, felt that media didn't reflect them. And so they weren't going to put their dollars behind the media. They weren't going to subscribe. They weren't going to, so this is just also an economic imperative.
Right. Absolutely.
I just want to say I love the Tennessean, and I grew up in a small town outside of Memphis, so that's in my little area. The Emancipator is not out yet. We're in the process of building it, and so we're actually developing our target audience. And based on demographics, we think we're going to go for 24 to 45 social justice oriented people. But also to go back and scoop up those people who were convicted by the events of last year and who want to be better educated and want to make better decisions. So that will be created, a subset of people who may be, middle-aged, right? And more educated or have more money. We're developing that psychographic right now and conducting some surveys. It will be a national publication. We'll be using Boston as a microcosm to amplify themes related to equality of all kinds. But it's a national audience. And hopefully, we will raise some issues that have global implications and eventually, build an audience outside of that.
Sure. The question is a good reminder that it's been a while since I've done or had done for me a focus group to really pinpoint who is reading our opinion pages. More broadly, the Herald newsroom has pinpointed 7 or 8 zip codes in this community of underserved readers. And we have been mostly African-American, I think some Hispanic also. We have created a Black Lives reporter who is doing wonderful in-depth stories, holistic and human stories. out of these zip codes in particular that go beyond, I was born a poor Black child. And we are putting those stories in front of the paywall.
Yeah.
So that
Mhm.
they can access them just more easily. And we're pairing that with listening sessions with a diversity of African American, Caribbean American, and African readers that we are doing every few months.
That's great. I
Yeah.
think, sorry, just to, I mean, I think probably the Washington Post's biggest base of readership is more mature audiences. And and if we want to get younger audiences, obviously, for longevity and to make sure that we're reaching people where they are. And what that means for a lot of people is not in a print newspaper. It's not even on the website because maybe they don't have the money or desire to subscribe. So in our shop, Edgar Ramirez works on social media. He's been putting a lot of effort into Instagram, Twitter, of course. Sabrina Mali is a new addition to our team who's been doing Thursday talks with columnists on Instagram. And so I think, you know, as people think about reaching new audiences, is where are they? How do they consume information? And if you talk to younger people, it's not in the newspaper.
Right. Exactly.
So it's reimagining what is an op-ed.
Yep.
And where does it go?
Yeah.
Yep.
We unfortunately, this has been a fabulous conversation. We are running out of time. We have about 8 more minutes. I think our viewers will kill me if I do not ask this. How do you pitch an op-ed? How do some of our viewers who are on the other side and want to know, how do they pitch an op-ed to you specifically? Briefly, Terry?
Well, we look at everything. So the easiest thing is to send in your full draft, 750 to 800 words, at oped@latimes.com.
Maybe you could put that in the chat room.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah. If we could all just put that our contact info in the chat room, that'd be great. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no. I will do that. So oped@latimes.com, and there is an editor looking at that, all the time by the hour, and we will respond to you. We get hundreds and hundreds a week, of course, and then we also commission. But the main thing is what we're looking for is, we're looking for everything. So don't think that this isn't a topic that we wouldn't be interested in. We're interested in everything. Some of it is right on the news, some of it is not. Sometimes the best op-eds are alerting us to something that we didn't know about. And so it's not easy, but that's how to pitch an op-ed. And if you go to the LA Times site, you go to the op-ed page, it's all, on the opinion site, then there's an op-ed page. At op-ed section, right at the top, there is how to submit an op-ed, and then it's op-ed explained, kind of the things we're looking for. So
put a link in the chat box from the op-ed project. It goes over some pitching guidelines. It's been shared. So people can think about that, but you want to answer the question, so what, why me, why now, right? Somebody said, is the message more important or is the person more important? Well, it's a little bit of both. You got to have a killer message. It needs to be a timely message. It needs to be linked to the public conversation, news hook. And also you need to have the credibility to write that thing, right? And if it's not you, then who?
Yeah, credibility. That's really important. Kate.
What they said. Can't say it better. I'll just give oped@washpost.com.
Right, great. For the Herald, it's I prefer one, we ask for exclusivity. And two, I ask that you contact me first. I get tons of unsolicited op-eds, and I should do a better job of having like a bounce back that if you haven't heard from me in a week, pitch it elsewhere, but I don't have that. I should. I will. But I ask that you contact me first. Tell me what you're thinking of so I can respond and say, great idea. Let's have a phone conversation. And so we can flesh this out a little more. And that way you're not as disappointed, but there are a lot of disappointed op-ed editors because writers, because we just don't have the bandwidth to look at each and every submission. And so, yeah, I prefer, one off the news, better if it's Florida focused, South Florida focused, but it isn't always. So if you have an expertise on a national issue that not everyone out there is saying, I'd love to hear more. I'd love to hear more about that. I also like stuff out of left field, out of left field. And the op-ed that got 500,000 page views came from a former professor of mine. I mean, I've known him now for like 40 years now, right? Writes about NASA, space travel. He wrote about Mars exploration and if we don't want to go the way of the dinosaurs. That got 500,000 views. I do not know why, but it was totally out of left field. And my former professor now thinks I'm a goddess. I think, oh, I went from being really scared of him 40 years ago to, oh, I'm a goddess. So anyway.
Well, to your point about exclusivity, Nancy, I just wanted to let people know that if you pitch something and the window of relevance is closing, you can pitch elsewhere, but you just need to be kindly write the editor back to let them know that you're pulling due to the window of relevance and that you hope to work with them again.
Yes, right, exactly.
There was a question from Jay in the chat. Do you give a pass on exclusivity if it's already run on social media, an obscure blog, etc.? And I think Nancy touched on that where she saw something on Facebook and then pulled it into the op-ed space. We've done that before where we would work with the writer to freshen it, make it a bit different. But we get ideas from Twitter. For example, if someone has done a tweet thread that is extraordinary, we'll reach out to them and say, we'd love you to write that in an op-ed. So
yeah, exactly. I always add in the tagline, this op-ed was originally published, maybe in longer form or shorter form, whatever, on Facebook, just for, or that blog, or that blog. So we have about 2 more minutes, and I guess I want to just hand it over to you. What's your next challenge? Terry?
Well, it's a continuing challenge, just to reach out to communities, readers, audiences that I don't even know exist, and to find the writers and the voices that represent those community, and which is what makes my work interesting every day. And it's the challenge that makes it really interesting, because I'm talking to all kinds of people and saying, I just didn't know. I mean, I didn't know about your community or about this issue, and now we want to bring that issue onto our page. So that's the continuing and new challenge every day.
Absolutely. Kate?
I think my new challenge, or the one I haven't won, as we never win anything, but younger audiences for sure. The people that don't subscribe or read the traditional news, how do we reach them? My colleague Dave Jorgensen on the news side has done an amazing job with TikTok. And so I'm not going to do TikTok, but but how do we get them? So that's a thing. And I don't know if we want to do a lightning round after Deborah shares her next challenge of trying to answer questions in the chat if people have time. It's just an idea.
Well, I think I have about an hour, and so I do have to wrap up unless someone tells me I don't. Tell me I don't. This is so great. But Deborah, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat room.
Yeah, so at a practical level, because we're building this plane and flying it at the same time, and we hope to launch first quarter 2022, is where we just actually established our pitches email. So we're just opening up the floodgates now, and I really want to get really great ideas, evidence-based arguments, and build some deep analysis as we build out our topics. I'm not a big fan of rants, and so I want to see how deep we can go and how we can start to shape what will clearly, turn out to be an emancipator piece, to the public. And while we're founded in Boston, we have a challenge of connecting with the rest of the nation. So I'm really excited about developing a big voice in a crowded space, so people know that we're here.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate all of you doing this, all of you just really conveying such, interesting, that's not the word I wanted, significant and thoughtful information as to how we all do our jobs, and to whom we're really reaching out to, which really is everyone. I'm going to turn it back to Beth Francesco. And again, thank you, everyone. I would urge the people who did not get their questions addressed to send them to us individually. We have each put in our contact info, so we remain here for you. Thanks so much. Beth?
Thank you so much, Nancy. I want to echo what you said. Thank you to the panelists today. This has been fantastic. I hate that we have to stop for time, but we want to be respectful of your time and what you have going on today. And thank you to our audience for all of the fantastic questions. As Nancy said, I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them, but there will be more to come. And we hope that if you learned something valuable today, that you'll support the Institute's work with a gift. The link to donate will be in the chat just in a second. Please do check your email later this afternoon. We'll be sending a link to of the recording of this program, as well as a survey. We would love your feedback and for you to tell us what else you need in this space. We hope that you stay well, and thank you again for being here. We hope to see you soon.